will definitely be sufficient in order to pass the exam. The difference is that there is an element of some form of time pressure because once you proceed to once we leave a question behind, then definitely we will only go back to these questions at the end of the exam. So it's a multiple choice examination. So don't worry about that. I already asked Mama Ricar to prepare the scantrons. And yun, there's no essay, there will be identification, but if you know what you're looking at, then tomorrow that should be manageable. I'm not saying easy, but manageable. So as a formal review, please don't forget your basic histology. Again, what is important is for you to be able to differentiate woven and lamellar bone. Woven bone being the immature form of bone, and lamellar bone is the strong, mature form of bone, wherein you can see your osteocytes as well as the lamellations that characterize your lamellar bone. It's also important for you to be familiar with the different cells in your lamellar bone. Within your lacunae, you see your osteocytes and the plasmacytoid-looking osteoblasts, as well as your osteoclasts. Okay? So this is what I refer to. So definitely in your woven bone, you can see that your osteoblasts are really the immature bone, whereas your osteocytes are located with lacunae, and your multinucleated osteoclasts are responsible for bone resorption. In contrast, in your mature lamellar bone, aside from seeing the lamellae within your bone matrix, your osteoblasts are quiescent, meaning they are not plump, they are flattened in appearance, but you can still see osteoclasts depending upon the nature or the current state of your bone, because sometimes bone resorption is necessary, especially in fractured bones and in areas of bone healing. You're already familiar with the metabolic diseases of the bone, and I'm sure that by now you have memorized the cutoff that distinguishes osteoporosis from osteopenia. Please do not forget about the primary causes and secondary causes of osteoporosis. The primary causes being postmenopausal, the postmenopausal state, senility, and of course idiopathic, or wherein we do not know what resulted in the osteoporosis. On the other hand, every other insult that may cause osteoporosis may be sufficiently classified as a secondary cause. And that includes your endocrine disorders, malnutrition, certain drugs, tumors or neoplasms, and congenital disorders. So congenital disorders, although we did not discuss them extensively in your lecture, but I gave that as a reading assignment so that you may be able to read through your Robbins. We touch on the different types of fractures, from the green stick fracture, which is common in young patients, to your transverse, in which there is a complete break in your bone, comminuted or fragmented bone, your spiral, which involves not only a complete break of the bone, but also a rotational distortion of your bone, and of course, your compound fracture, in which your bone penetrates or punctures through your subcutaneous tissues and skin. I am sure that you have touched on the different signs and symptoms and the treatment of fracture in your SGD and surgery course, if ever. But what is more important for us is to also know how the bone heals in the setting of fracture, from the initial break to the formation of hematoma, which serves as the focus wherein your granulation tissue forms, followed by revascularization or the formation of new blood vessels, and the resorption of your immature bone. Afterwards, this is followed by the deposition of your fibrocartilage, or what we call as a soft callus, with the eventual hardening or mineralization of this callus, resulting in a hard callus, and finally to the formation of the compact bone at the original fracture site. Vascular necrosis, I have shown you gross images of this particular disease, and usually it's a result of the breakage of your um, vascular supply. But at the same time, certain insults, such as the administration of corticosteroids, might also result in a vascular necrosis, also known as osteonecrosis. But as I have mentioned, um, the mechanism, the pathophysiology by which corticosteroids result in a vascular necrosis is not yet well elucidated. And of course, your avascular necrosis is characterized by this dead bone and necrotic marrow. So then you know that this is your dead bone because there are no osteocytes within the lacunae. So it's very distinct here. At the same time, your normally purplish marrow under the microscopic slide appears to be pink. There is coagulation necrosis in which the cellular outlines are lost. That's why you cannot identify anymore the erythroid and the myeloid precursors. Osteomyelitis, we have discussed quite a number of osteomyelitis, but in particular, we are interested in bacterial and in tuberculous osteomyelitis. So please, it's in Robbins, please do read about the different organisms, especially the most common organisms that may cause not only osteomyelitis, but also arthritis. Okay, because per age group, there are different organisms that are more commonly seen, such as your Neisseria gonorrhea, your um, uh, beta streptococcus or staphylococcus aureus. So you have to be familiar which is most common in which setting. Is it due to a traumatic injury? Is it because the patient is a neonate or is it because the patient is an adolescent? I have repeatedly emphasized that in the study of bone and soft tissue pathology, what's important is for you to identify or to correlate with the imaging findings as well as some clinical features. And when I say clinical features, I cannot emphasize this enough. Be always familiar with the age of your patient. Okay? So what happens in osteomyelitis is that you have the site of initial infection. You have an area deprived of blood supply, resulting in the formation of a subperiosteal abscess. And afterwards, you have your dead bone inside, which is called your sequestrum, with an overlying involucrum. In certain cases, you will see sinus formation or a gaping hole from which you can view your sequestrum. So you may want to take a look at some images online of what a sequestrum looks like, or the involucrum as well. So please take note that I might already be dropping some hints or some clues as to what the questions might be tomorrow. Okay? Especially those that I keep on repeating ever since we started this course. Tuberculous osteomyelitis is most commonly seen in the setting of pot disease. So there is a collapse of your vertebra. And when we do a biopsy of this collapsed structure, what we see here will be the central core of caseation necrosis, surrounded by your epithelioid histiocytes, some lymphocytes, some neutrophils, and most distinctively, these multinucleated giant cells with a distinctive horseshoe arrangement of the nuclei. And this is what we call your Langhans type giant cell. So at the very least, you are introduced to three types of multinucleated giant cells in bone and soft tissue pathology. Your osteoclasts, your Langhans type giant cells, and your um, regular multinucleated giant cells in giant cell tumor. Okay, some people call them osteoclast-like giant cell because there is some evidence that those are not necessarily osteoclasts in the first place. Okay, my favorite diagram, and I've shown you this several times, that it's very much possible to infer what is the provisional diagnosis by knowing the age of the patient, whether the patient is young, less than 30 years old, or whether the patient is more than 30 years old. Afterwards, look at the imaging findings. Is the lesion located in the diaphysis, the metaphysis, or the epiphysis? If it's located in any of these three regions, then you begin to evaluate whether it's located within the center of the bone or in the marrow area, or is it an outgrowth like what you see in osteochondroma? Okay, or sometimes it may occur or transverse two regions, but all the same, the location is characteristic. And as I have repeatedly mentioned, the age already gives you a clue. For instance, in your diaphysis, you can see fibrous dysplasia, Ewing sarcoma, Langerhans histiocytosis, or leukemia. But in the adult patient, it's usually a metastasis, a myeloma, or a lymphoma. In the metaphysis, in the young patient, practically you only have to deal with osteosarcoma. Whereas in the older patient, your giant cell tumor is usually located from the metaphysis and crosses over to your epiphysis. Then your giant cell tumor and chondroblastoma can look vaguely similar because they both harbor multinucleated giant cells. But again, the clue is in the age of the patient, and of course, the word or the phrase chicken wire calcifications is most commonly associated with chondroblastoma. At the same time, some of these lesions, not necessarily malignancies, may be seen in both ages, such as your enchondroma, which is usually located in a submetaphyseal location. Infections, especially those adjacent to the joints, while the rest are usually associated with specific or with certain age ranges. So this will just be a run through of the different entities that might pop in your exam. Again, look at the imaging findings if you are given. Look at the description with the age. So there can be case-based questions. Okay, very common, like for instance for osteosarcoma, 17-year-old male with a lesion at the distal or the at the knee, and then imaging studies were performed, and you see a destructive lesion extending from the metaphysis to the epiphysis. Again, you just have to look at the image and confirm whether it's an osteosarcoma or not. Of course, it might be a two-step question. You might be asked about the recommended choice of treatment or the recommended treatment. Don't worry, we won't go to the specifics because this is not a pharmacology or a surgery course. It's more of being familiar with what is the best intervention for certain diseases. So you're already familiar with this, like your fibrous cortical defect, also known as non-ossified fibroma, which is composed of this storiform pattern of the bland spindle cells. And definitely, there are no ossified structures within the lesion. On imaging, it appears like this lytic lesion that is well defined with a sclerotic border. On the other hand, if you see these characteristic Chinese shaped characters in what appears to be a fibrous cellular stroma with no storiform pattern, there is no osteoblastic rimming, and occasionally associated with certain syndromic conditions, that will be your fibrous dysplasia. And as I have told you, fibrous dysplasia, originally thought as a developmental disorder, shows some evidence that it could also be a neoplastic condition. And you know that this is more common in younger patients. Like what I have told you, or what I have shared with you in one of my stories about this patient who was unfortunately misdiagnosed as ossifying fibroma. Osteosarcoma, so again, very small. There is a small nidus that you see. And then it's vaguely similar to fibrous dysplasia, in which you see bony structures within the lesion, but this one is more of a woven bone. And you can see the transition from the woven bone to your mature lamellar bone at the periphery. In a related entity to osteoblastoma, which does not respond to NSAID treatment, will be your osteoblastoma. One of my favorite entities because this is practically very easy to diagnose in the setting of your when you have the appropriate imaging and clinical features plus the straightforward features of this entity, osteosarcoma. So again, you see a very malignant looking sarcomatous lesion. At the same time, you see osteoid deposition. Okay, in this particular slide, this is the area where you see this hyaline, somewhat glassy, pinkish amorphous substance that is your osteoid. And you can see how distinctly pink this area is compared to the surrounding tissues. You might encounter in your exam a description, like for instance, the patient has a colonic mass, he's elderly already, underwent chemotherapy, then suddenly complained of bone pain. Then even if you are not familiar with the lesion, but you are quite sure that it's an adenocarcinoma, then probably the best answer will be a metastatic lesion, right? And I have shown you these images before. Your metastatic papillary thyroid carcinoma, metastatic prostatic carcinoma, breast carcinoma, um, endometrioid carcinoma, and a few entities that are not very well differentiated but really look malignant. So again, go to the history. The cases are short because I did not want to overwhelm you with what do you call this? I did not want to overwhelm you with text. Okay, it's mostly pictures based, but the clues in the text are sufficient. So don't expect that the questions will be very lengthy because you only have 1 minute to read through the question. So at most, it will be a two-liner description, usually with the age, the imaging findings if available, and probably a few more questions like whether the patient has an anterior neck mass or whether the patient is a female and let's say has presented with elevated CA125. That's already a very helpful tool. Okay, so it's tying up what you know from your previous modules. So again, metastatic tumors can be anything. Osteochondroma is a benign condition, and we have seen this earlier in the diagram that I have shown you. It appears as an outgrowth, and you can see that it has 3 layers: the cartilaginous cap, the fibrous capsule surrounding it, and then the mature lamellar bone underneath. Okay, please do not forget this very, very characteristic morphology of osteochondroma. And enchondroma, on the other hand, you might be shown images in which you have a lytic or a bubbly lesion in some of the bones. So please look carefully at the images. Um, Sometimes they're seen at the distal phalanx. They might be involved. They might be in the carpals as well. So please look. And what you see will be this bluish chondroid matrix, wherein you see the chondrocytes within. And the chondrocytes, if you will recall, have this very hyperchromatic round nuclei, and that is what helps you distinguish these chondrocytes from the malignant cells of chondrosarcoma, which is shown in the following slide. Again, as you can see, your atypical cartilaginous tumor, also known as your chondrosarcoma grade 1, vaguely resembles your usual chondrocytes, but um, the cells appear more atypical than usual. They are less hyperchromatic, and then there is atypia and pleomorphism. Excuse me for a bit, okay? And then, as you proceed to chondrosarcoma grade 2 and chondrosarcoma grade 3, then you will see that the cells become more atypical, they become more pleomorphic, and like this cell, it's very large, it's very atypical, as well as this cell. So again, the clue that you might be looking at a chondrosarcoma, it's the bluish gray myxoid background. But be careful because if you see osteoid formation, although that might be a higher level already, and that might separate your top notchers from the more regular creatures in the class. Okay, so be careful because if you see osteoid deposition, then we might be dealing with chondroblastic osteosarcoma. Okay, so now that we have touched on a little bit about the most common tumors of your bone and cartilage, then we now discuss the tumors of your soft tissue. We have your lipoma, and your lipoma again can have a variety of morphologies. You can have your straightforward lipoma, adenolipoma, or myelolipoma, which is composed of these marrow-like elements. Sometimes you can see your angiolipoma with prominent vessels, and vaguely your lipoma might resemble cartilage, so that's your chondrolipoma. Sometimes you can see extensive fibrous tissues that will be your fibrolipoma. The good thing about soft tissue tumors is that most of their malignant counterparts are followed with sarcoma. So definitely your liposarcomas have a variety of morphologies, including your well-differentiated liposarcoma, in which you see these atypical stromal cells admixed with varicize or adipocytes of varying sizes. Okay, you can have your myxoid round cell liposarcoma. Sometimes you can still see the fat, but what characterizes this lesion will be this myxoid background, reminiscent of your chondrosarcoma. Another thing that should characterize your myxoid or round cell liposarcoma will be the fine vascular network that is interspersed in the lesion. You can have pleomorphic lipoma, you can still see the adipocytes, but what should strike you in this lesion will be this atypical nuclei, and you're the differentiated liposarcoma. Again, the term the differentiated, referring to the transformation of your usual liposarcoma or typical lipomatous tumor into something that do not resemble or does not resemble anymore your liposarcoma. In fact, it may be a malignant, it may resemble an undifferentiated pleomorphic sarcoma, rhabdomyosarcoma, or other similar entities. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next set of entities. Actually, these are additional examples, okay, of liposarcoma. So what you have here will be your, sometimes the atypical stromal cells are not very distinct and you have a lipoma-like liposarcoma. The clue here is that unlike your run-of-the-mill lipoma, so let's go back to the previous slide, you really do not see the nuclei in your straightforward lipoma, but in your lipoma like liposarcoma, there are hyperchromatic foci, and that will be your atypical stromal cells. Your sclerosing liposarcoma is composed of these thick bands of collagen, and practically it's very hard to see the adipocytes. And then you have your mixed type, wherein you can have your sclerotic and lipoma like liposarcoma, and your inflammatory liposarcoma can have prominent inflammatory conditions. So for your level, do you have to identify the specific subtypes? Not necessarily, but I want you to be able to document that there are indeed atypical stromal cells. There is an adipocytic component. And lastly, um, there is a heterogeneity in the cell size. And therefore, you are dealing with a liposarcoma and not just any other lesion. So these are just further examples of how ugly looking the nuclei of your liposarcoma can be. Your embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma or your rhabdomyosarcomas for that matter, if there are two subtypes that I want you to remember, that will be your embryonal and alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma. Please review the different mutations, especially those involving FOXO1. Okay? Your embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma is what we call as a small round blue cell tumor. And please do not forget, especially in the mucosal surfaces, that sometimes these small cells form what we call a cambium layer. So when you see this aggregation of tumor cells underneath the mucosal layer, then that's the cambium layer, and that's very much characteristic of your embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma. In contrast, your alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma vaguely looks like your lungs, but you can see the malignant cells filling up these spaces. Okay, and definitely these are not pulmonary tissues. These might be soft tissues in the head, in the neck, or in the deep soft tissues of the viscera. Here are the two most common um what do you call this? The two most common lesions, or the two most common smooth muscle soft tissue tumors that you might encounter. One is leiomyoma. This one is somewhat myxoid in appearance, and your leiomyosarcoma. Your leiomyosarcoma again is characterized by the moderate to severe atypia, the foci of coagulative type necrosis, and of course, the increased mitotic count or the increased proliferation of the cells. In contrast, your leiomyoma might have one, but definitely not necrosis. So please remember that, okay? That of the three features, atypia, increased mitotic count, and what do you call this? And necrosis. The one feature that you should not see in your run-of-the-mill leiomyoma is necrosis. You can see some increase in mitotic figures, that's okay. You can see some bizarre nuclei, that's okay in leiomyoma, but definitely not necrosis. And then, these are tumors of your blood vessels. Again, you have your hemangioma and your angiosarcoma. So your hemangioma, you can see the flattened endothelial cells, and then the non-atypical stromal cells within the fibrous septa. In contrast, in your angiosarcoma, you see these large pleomorphic atypical cells, and it's vasoformative because you can still see these channels, but at the same time, you know that something is growing because these are same objectives that were used to take images of these two lesions. And as you can see that the nuclei in your angiosarcoma are definitely more atypical and pleomorphic. Please do not forget the difference between atypical and pleomorphic. Atypia means variation in the cell size. Pleomorphism refers to variation in the shape of the cells. Um, s- this is a very, again, this is a very common lesion that you might see, and you might be asked about Anthony A, which is a cellular component, in comparison to Anthony B, which is the less cellular component. And maybe I might even show you images of Verocay bodies. And once you see all these features, those are characteristic of schwannoma, a tumor of nerve sheath origin. In contrast, your neurofibroma is characterized by this distinct bright blobs of collagen, what we call the shredded carrot appearance. And when we go at a higher power, we can see the nuclei are wavy, somewhat spindled, but there is no severe atypia or pleomorphism. In contrast, your malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumor has areas of necrosis, has areas of hypocellularity and hypercellularity. Then you can see that there are very big, very elongated nuclei. Okay. And again, I have emphasized in the lecture that you should correlate that with the clinical findings. Okay. So if I mention in the exam that on dissection of the tumor, it was seen to be associated with a nerve, we're practically dealing with a malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumor. Of course, neurofibroma and schwannoma can be associated with nerves. So please take a closer look at the lesion that you are seeing. At the same time, at the description, was it rapidly enlarging? Um, Was it destructive? Does it appear to infiltrate the surrounding tissue? Those things. Okay. And of course, I have shown you this, your malignant triton tumor. And probably you might recall that I briefly touched on the IHCs. And definitely your malignant triton tumor is the one that exhibits skeletal muscle differentiation and will be positive for muscle markers, for skeletal muscle markers such as your desmin, myogenin, and myod1. Your fibromatosis vaguely resembles neurofibroma. After all, they are both fibromatous in nature, but the difference is that this is more arranged in long fascicles, and they might invade the surrounding structure, such as these muscle fragments. So you can see that the bright pink areas are actually compatible with skeletal muscle. So your fibromatosis is an intermediate grade lesion. It rarely metastasizes, but what's more striking is that it is locally aggressive. Aside from fibromatosis, please don't forget about undifferentiated pleomorphic sarcoma, which does not show you any evident differentiation. And of course, nodular fasciitis, which is a lesion usually located in the forearm. It comes and goes, although it has been shown that it has a characteristic translocation as well. So please study all the translocations that I mentioned. GNAS, FOS, okay, FOXO1, those things. EXT, I might ask one or two about those particular mutations. You might be given a particular image with a particular imaging, a particular case descriptor, and then you will be asked what the mutation is for that particular lesion. For giant cell tumors, you have to be familiar with two. Your giant cell tumor of bone and your giant cell tumor of tendon sheath. So your giant cell tumor of tendon sheath appears to be vaguely composed of two types of cells, those cells with clear cytoplasm and those that are more compact. Then of course, the reason why they are called giant cell tumors is because of the osteoclast-like giant cells that are interspersed within the tumor. And a few other curiosities that you will encounter: Ewing sarcoma, which is positive for CD99, strong membranous expression of CD99, and you don't please do not forget the translocations associated with Ewing sarcoma. But usually the partner gene is EWSR1, so it could be FLY1, it could be ERG or ERG. Okay? Your giant cell tumor of bone, which is also composed of osteoclasts, but the nuclei of giant cell tumor of bone are more numerous than what we see in giant cell tumor of tendon sheath. And definitely, unlike your giant cell tumor of tendon sheath, in which some of the areas do not appear to have giant cells, such as this one, your giant cell tumor of bone is actually what immediately strikes you will be the abundance of your multinucleated giant cells. Synovial sarcoma can be monophasic or biphasic, and it's biphasic because here there are areas that appear gland-like, and you can see that there are eosinophilic or pink secretions. And on the other side, you see the spindle shape, which is the more common variant of monophasic synovial sarcoma. Aneurysmal bone cyst can have multinucleated giant cells as well, but from the name itself, you can have these aneurysmal spaces. So these are filled with blood. Okay. So once you see these two images or two similar looking images opposed to each other, one filled with spaces and the other one filled with multinucleated giant cells, then the correct answer will be aneurysmal bone cyst. Again, please take note of the location of these lesions. Again, just to emphasize that you have to be familiar with the age, you have to be familiar with the location, whether it's in the diaphysis, metaphysis, or epiphysis. So evidently, for the most part, I will be asking you about tumors of the long bones. Okay? So take a look. Aneurysmal bone cyst, more common in the young, somewhere in the region of the metaphysis. Osteosarcoma, metaphyseal, giant cell tumor, epiphyseal, metastasis, usually in the diaphysis. Okay? Sige, now we will move forward to the other. Again, just to continuously emphasize the lesions that you should be familiar by now. So the benign and the malignant counterparts, don't worry about those in gray because you will really encounter them rarely, and that is why most likely I did not include them in the exam. Okay, most likely. We also touch on these giant cell tumor of tendon sheath, your Ewing sarcoma, synovial sarcoma, aneurysmal bone cyst, and GCT of bone. Sorry, nag-repeat ang other slides, okay? No, just to emphasize to you the different IHCs. Solitary fibrous tumor is relatively common, but it's a tumor of uncertain differentiation. And if anything, you just have to be familiar with STAT6, okay? It's the marker for solitary fibrous tumor. For peripheral nerve sheath tumors, the marker is S100. It can be really diffuse in schwannoma and neurofibroma, but in your um, malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumor, it has a tendency to be focally positive only. And as I have mentioned, if desmin or a or your muscle marker is positive, then we are dealing with a triton tumor. So after this storm of tumors of the bone and soft tissue, then the last will be your sort of mga benign entities. Please study well the difference between osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis because I might ask a few questions about this. Okay. So, what's their pathogenesis? Like osteoarthritis, usually due to mechanical injury. Rheumatoid arthritis is mostly due to immunity. Which joints are involved, whether they are weight bearing or whether they are the small joints? What kind of pathologic changes are seen, such as degeneration and fragmentation in osteoarthritis or pannus formation in rheumatoid arthritis? And whether there is involvement of other organs. Rheumatoid arthritis, because it's an autoimmune disorder, will definitely involve other organs, such as your lungs and the heart. Okay? Serum markers, they might be available for rheumatoid arthritis, such as rheumatoid factor, but definitely not for osteoarthritis. You should be familiar with this diagram by now, in which you are shown the differences between osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. So in rheumatoid arthritis, you see the pannus formation, the erosion of cartilage, and the occasional bony ankylosis. In contrast, in osteoarthritis, your bony spurs are formed, your cartilage is thinned out, and there is subchondral sclerosis. Aside from comparing osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis, it's also important for you to be familiar with the differences between gout and pseudogout, the type of crystals that we see in each entity. And you know that gout is the one that harbors your monosodium urate crystals. Possible association with certain syndromic conditions such as Leach-Nyhan syndrome, which is associated with gout. Okay. Lastly, the treatment. You know that gout can be treated with certain medications, okay? Whereas your pseudo gout is less likely to respond to medications such as colchicine. And then, please be familiar with the different anatomic patterns of peripheral neuropathies, whether only one nerve is involved, whether multiple nerves are involved, or whether the ganglia of the nerves are also affected. So the classic example of polyneuropathy that is symmetric and involves the distal extremities will be diabetic neuropathy. So sometimes I might show you in the exam the different patterns, and you might be asked of the following, which of the following choices which present with this particular pattern of neuropathy. Or I might show a particular pattern of neuropathy, and you will be asked which of these entities are classically associated with this particular pattern. Then a few miscellaneous entities, so ganglion cysts, and I have repeatedly emphasized that for ganglion cysts, most of us have this one way or another. And there is no lining. It's a pseudocyst. Okay? Your plasma cell neoplasms, which your multiple myeloma, if it's associated with several conditions or several presentations like hypercalcemia, anemia, in particular bony osteolytic lesions. And what is important for you is to see whether these are plasmacytoid in appearance. And you know that what separates a plasma cell, a true plasma cell, from your plasmacytoid cells, but are not plasma cells, will be the presence of your perinuclear HOF, or this pale area that you see in some of the cells. It's possible that it's not very obvious in all cells, but definitely once you see this pale area adjacent to the eccentrically located nucleus, then we are dealing with a plasma cell myeloma. So this is from a bone marrow core. There is still a residual megakaryocyte here, but you see that the cells have somewhat eosinophilic cytoplasm. And this is a very helpful clue that we are dealing with a plasma cell myeloma. Lastly, your chordoma, you might encounter these vitelliferous cells, and the prognosis is poor for chordoma because it's not receptive or it's not responsive to radiotherapy. And aside from the fact that it's always located, or most of them, not always, most of them are located in the axial skeleton, in the hard to reach areas such as the pelvis and the clivus. So that is a very brief review of what to expect for tomorrow. So again, how can you prepare for this exam? Be familiar with the most basic sa clinical history. What age do you see these lesions? What is the imaging finding of the lesion? Are there any associated mutations? So sometimes there are none, right? Like your leiomyosarcoma. What I mentioned to you will be a complex karyotype. What are the characteristic histologic features? I assure you that if some of the images I might reuse, some of the images might be different but are still representative of that particular lesion. So all the images are carefully selected. Okay? And you might be asked a little bit about treatment. So such as gout, which is we have anti-gout medications already, so there might be questions related to that, or which of the lesions respond to NSAIDs, right? Or at the same time, um, a few unusual, but I'm sure you're familiar because I mentioned them, like denosumab for giant cell tumor of bone, and which of the tumors are responsive to chemotherapy, such as your osteosarcoma and rhabdomyosarcoma, and which of the tumors are not responsive, such as liposarcoma and chordoma. Okay, so those are the things that you have to be familiar with. Use my PowerPoint. I sent it through Daniel as a guide, and try to read up on the most important portions of Robbins. Okay. And again, by now you should have finished reading Robbins, and what you have to be reading now will be your notes and my PowerPoint. So, are there questions regarding the projection exam or anything related to bone and soft tissue pathology?
So can we ask if for tomorrow's exam, should we only bring a pencil?
You can bring snacks.
Thank you po,
You can
Doc.
also bring snacks, okay? So, bring pencils, snacks. You don't have to bring your bags. Hello po, Doc. Will there be options? Yes, as I have mentioned, there will be options, but to those who don't want options, I can give you a separate exam for that. But yes, there are options. So that's why we're taking the exams as Scantron. Um, it's a usual Scantron exam. Pencil, eraser, what else? Snacks. Just don't um eat noisily, okay? And you don't have to bring anything else. Any other questions?
Any
So this,
tips, Doc, for tomorrow?
any tips? I don't want to say that your first answer is always right, but for personally, I won't delve big. Here's the tip. Actually, this is applicable to many projection exams. Do not expect it to be a very detailed type of exam in the sense that there will be no long texts. Okay. So, in other words, in a way, I crammed in the most significant details about the cases. So, there is no attempt to confuse you. So again, I'm not saying that your first answer is the correct answer, but if you cover the choices, then most likely what you're thinking is the correct answer. Okay, try not to look at the choices first. Okay, so that's my tip. And again, the images are very classic for the entities that you will see. But some of the questions might be two-step. And if ever they are two-step, it's usually what is the mutation associated with this tumor? What is the treatment associated with this tumor? What is the name of this syndrome that is that is characterized by the presence of these two tumors? Okay? I mean, there are clues already. And rest assured, I won't show you images that in one way or another, something that we did not discuss. Okay? But I can be creative with the images. But I won't give you an image that you will say na was not discussed at all. Other questions? So if there are none, please be there lang siguro like mga 10 to 15 minutes so that we can set up because I also want you to be able to see clearly. The range, I don't want you to be arranged alphabetically because some of you might need to be seated in front because you may appreciate a better. By the way, Daniel, where is the room 212, 211?
Doc, room 212 po.
Okay, sige. So 212, sige, let's be there mga 10 to 15 minutes so we can set up. When I say set up, you can position yourselves, but please do not bring your bags. You can bring snacks, drinks, that's fine, candies, and so that we can also give an opportunity for those who want to be seated in front as well. Okay? Sige, any other questions or concerns? I suppose that there are none. So going once, going twice, going thrice. So if there are none, good luck tomorrow. Wait. There's a private question. May we ask for this set of slides? Sure, I'll send to Daniel. Okay. So Daniel, you'll receive the slides in a bit. Okay.
Doc,
So
this
no
new
more
slide
question.
po.
These review slides. Okay.
Apo, apo.
I guess it can be useful for a quick review lang.
Yes, Doc.
Okay, sige. I'll be sending these slides to you. So other questions?
Nando.
Nana, sige. So please study well and I'll see you tomorrow. Don't worry that much. I think this based from last year, ha. This is actually one of the exams in which the average performance of the class is much better simply because many of the questions are straightforward. Okay? Because we analyzed. I think someone got a line of 9 in this particular exam. It's really straightforward for the most part. Okay? Sige, so no more questions. Good luck, study well, and of course, sleep early. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Doc.
Thank you, Doc. God bless.